the Vapi command line interface, a powerful CLI for building, testing, and deploying voice AI applications without having to leave your development environment. And in today's video, I'm going to be going over everything from installation to assistant creation and management to even MCP integration. Let's jump in. Now, the first and most obvious thing we'll want to do is install our Vapi CLI tool. But before we get into that, let's just quickly skim over the documentation here and see exactly what we can achieve using the Vapi CLI. Obviously, here are our install commands, which we'll be using specifically on Windows today. But before we jump into installation, we need to see exactly what we can achieve here. So with the Vapi CLI directly in your terminal, we're able to do some assistant management using the following commands: phone number management, call operations, debugging, and logging. Now, what I think is the most impressive part of the Vapi CLI is this Vapi initializing command. And in this case, the CLI auto detects our tech stack and sets up everything we need. So a web SDK or something of that nature directly into our project's directory. And this makes it so much more easy to work with voice AI in setting up a new project or an existing project. Anyway, let's jump up to the top here and I'll copy the Windows installation command and we'll jump into our cursor IDE and start playing around with this thing. So just note here up on docs.vapi.ai/CLI, these are going to be your installation commands based on your operating system or whether you want to install it in a Docker container. So if you're on Mac OS or Linux, you'll want to use curl SSL and the installation path. If you're on Windows, we'll want to use this command here. So we'll jump straight into cursor and we can just run this command and this will initialize and install our Vapi CLI directly into our terminal. Now, I already have this installed, but if you haven't installed it and it's fresh, go ahead and run one of those 2 or 3 commands, dependent on your operating system. But when you have ran that command and it has installed correctly, we'll want to authenticate our Vapi account. And to do so, we can go ahead and run Vapi login. So it'll look something like this. That'll load now. And you'll see authentication successful and this little pop-up screen happening here. Once we've authenticated in, we can start to mess around with our agents, do some call commands and management. And most importantly, I think here is using the Vapi initialize command as well as some webhook testing commands. And I'll show you that in a second. So now that we've authenticated into our Vapi account here on the CLI, we can just run some account management commands for managing authentication before we move on to the fun stuff. And as I ran before, to check if you're authenticated, we can do Vapi auth status here. If you want to switch accounts, we can go ahead and run Vapi auth switch followed by your account name. If you want to see who you are, we can do Vapi auth who am I. This will tell you exactly who you are. If we want to view our API key and source, we can go ahead and run Vapi auth token. We'll just clear this. Now, if you want to log into a different account, say we've just logged in to our main account, we want to log into another one, we can go ahead and run Vapi auth login to add another account to our CLI here. And if we want to log out here, it'll be similar. We'll just say Vapi auth log out. If we want to log out of all accounts, we can go Vapi auth log out, tac all, and this will log out of all accounts. So some basic high-level management commands there when it comes to account authentication. So now that we're all authenticated with our Vapi accounts, we'll start by managing our voice agents. Now, one of the most high-level commands that we can do here is Vapi assistant list, and this will list all the assistants within your account. Now, I don't think I have any, so what we might want to do first is we'll do Vapi assistant create. Now, this will prompt us with our assistant name that we can go ahead and enter. I'll just say testing here, and we can manually put in our first message here. Hello, how can I help you today, for example, ? And it'll also prompt us with any default settings that we want to assign to this assistant. So I could just say yes, and that'll create our assistant. As you can see there, Vapi assistant created successfully. And this will give us our ID also that we can copy here. And we can go ahead and use something like our next command, Vapi assistant get. And this is pretty similar to the API reference, really. If I just use Vapi assistant get with that ID of the assistant we had just created directly in our CLI here, we'll get the schema, very basic schema of that assistant. So really, when it comes to assistants here, we have a few commands: our create command, our delete command, our get command, our list command, our update command. So I could do Vapi assistant delete using that ID of the assistant we had just created, and this will prompt the screen. Do you want to delete that assistant? We can say yes. And there you go, assistant deleted successfully. Now we can also do the Vapi assistant update, but really this isn't going to work too well. You're better off doing this, and it'll prompt you here doing this directly in your dashboard. There's really a bit of limitations here when it comes to directly in your CLI here updating your assistants, and it's the same for campaigns and workflows also. Speaking of campaigns and workflows, we can also manage that directly in our CLI here also. So I could run Vapi workflow list, and this will list any workflows that we have here. So as you can see here, I have one workflow, and this will respond with some basic details. Now, I just want to mention here, in terms of creating and managing assistants directly within the CLI, it's really not its strong suit. You're better off doing this directly with their API, or alternatively on the dashboard. So as far as these management, creation, updating commands pertaining to assistants, workflows, and campaigns also, we're going to sort of overlook here because it's largely the same. So instead of assistant, list, delete, as well as update, and then get, we can interchange this with workflows, as well as campaigns also. And this is the same for chat management as well, and also sort of call management also. But we'll jump into call management because this is quite easy to do. I'll just go ahead and clear the terminal here. So if we want to start managing calls directly in our CLI here, we can do Vapi call list, and this will list all the calls associated with our account. And you can see here we have about 50 calls in this particular account, and this will return some brief details like the call ID, status, created and ended at also. We could do Vapi call get to get a bit more information pertaining to a particular call using their ID. And this will retrieve a much larger response body pertaining to particular calls. So very interesting here, very easy to do. We don't have to go on the API documentation here and return a call, although you could do this directly in your dashboard as well. So let's see what else we have pertaining to calls. We can create a call, we can end a call programmatically here, we can get a call, which we had just done, and list our calls also, and again, updating a call also there. So let's go ahead and test Vapi call create. Now, this will create a new call, but we require some specific parameters, including the phone number ID, the customer or the destination number we want to send that call to, as well as the assistant ID to use. So what we can do here, and I'll just go ahead and clear our terminal here, is Vapi call create. We'll need our phone number ID, so Vapi call create, followed by our phone number ID, which will be a series of random numbers and characters, followed by our customer number in E164 format, so that'll look something like that, followed by our assistant ID, blah, blah, blah. There you go. And those IDs don't actually exist, but using those flags, we'll go ahead and distribute that call directly from our CLI. So let's see what else we can do here. And as I just suggested, we can end the call, list, update, a bunch of different commands. Now, everything regarding management and creation of these different components of Vapi is largely the same. We'll have the same sort of commands available to a user to interact with calls, assistants, chats, campaigns, as well as phone numbers as well, which we'll have a look into now. So we can run Vapi phone list. This will list all our phone numbers associated with an account. Now, if I run Vapi phone tac help, this will return our available commands that we can use particular to phone calls. And you'll notice here, much the same. So we can create a phone number, populates our terminal here with a link to purchase a phone number. So you can't actually directly purchase a phone number within the CLI. We can delete a phone number, get, list, update, and so forth. So if I just go back to really all the commands that we can do, we've gone through assistance, authentication, calls, campaigns, really the same, chats, and completion here is, we've also got init, which is really where this CLI excels, and we'll jump into that shortly. We've also got things like listen, login, which we've done, logs, MCP, phone, tool, and a bunch of different things. Really where I think personally the CLI excels is webhook testing, as well as our Vapi init command. So I could spend here ages going through all these, which all have the same available commands. It'll cycle through our Vapi, take phone for example, create, list, delete, as well as update and get. Really the same. Now, why exactly would you want Vapi CLI? Now, really the primary reason is to avoid having to go outside of your development environment to really initialize voice AI in your application. And I keep saying this, where Vapi CLI excels is this idea of Vapi init. So what Vapi init does will initialize a Vapi Web SDK or an SDK of that nature directly into your project. So you avoid having to manually go through and install the SDK within a web-based project or your server or everything like that. Another thing that we want to test out here is Vapi webhook. Now, when you're developing and testing out your Vapi assistants, and don't necessarily want to ping a live webhook constantly in testing, we can forward our webhook data to our local terminal here. And I'll show you that in just a second. But firstly, we'll probably want to initialize our Vapi within an actual project. So if we want to initialize our Vapi within web application or any application of that nature, we'll probably want a blanket application here to work off of. You'll see our Vapi CLI folder here is empty. So what I can do is npx create tac react tac app, and we'll call this my app, just a basic initialization of a React-based app here. Cool. So our React app has been created. You can see here, we've got our basic public and src folders here with our app.js. I could run this and it's going to be a blanket web page with the little React logo as normal. But really what we want to do here first is what we'll do is run Vapi init. We'll probably want to actually cd into the app first before we run that, and then run Vapi init. And this will analyze our app. We can go ahead and choose our framework here, and this is a React app, and it'll prompt us with, do we want to install the Vapi Web SDK? Considering it's a web-based application, this will be most appropriate specific to our React framework. We can go ahead and say yes. We can say yes to example code here, as well as generating Vapi components and hooks, which you'll want to use if you're injecting, say, a voice AI widget to your website. We'll create an environment configuration template also. And look at that, it's installing Vapi AI Web SDK directly into our React framework here. And it'll ask you also if you want to open the Vapi documentation. We'll say no for now. There we go. So if I clear that out, you'll see here under components, we have a Vapi button as well as Vapi code example here, as well as Vapi hooks to send server events to and so forth. We've also got an environment variable with what credentials we need to initialize our Vapi assistant or Vapi components into our React app also. So our base URL here will leave the same. I'm just going to put in some credentials here, our assistant ID, as well as our public key, and I'll show you exactly how easy it is following our Vapi init command to empower a web application with voice AI in a matter of minutes. So I'll go ahead and copy these. And once that's done, we can go ahead and rename this to actually on runtime be able to pick up our environment variables here. So I'll just remove the example and the dot and enter there. Now what I might do is actually use the code example here and initialize it or inject it into our main app.js on render. So what we can do here is just copy our import for a Vapi button here, and we'll just put this at the top. And I'll also just import our component here within our app as well. So what I just did is basically put our section or our button section within our main app.js using the Vapi example that they so kindly gave us. Now what I can do is run this server, and within a few minutes, I'll have a Vapi call button directly on our web application. If we run npm start here, this is going to spin up our basic server here. You'll see here, we'll full screen. You can see down here, added in our section. And now, really easily, we can go ahead and start a call. We'll use our mic here.
Hi there, this is Flex from Tech Solutions Customer Support. How can I help you today?
Hey man, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. How can I?
Awesome. Seamless. So initializing the Vapi SDK directly in our React project here in a matter of minutes. Now I'm going to go ahead and close this. Now, what if we want to test sort of the server events that call that we're having or users are having on our website directly in our development environment? We'll open a new terminal here and we'll run ngrok http 4242. And this will initialize a live URL that we can use to update that assistant that's on our website to forward any server events to this address. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, and we can go over to our Vapi assistant here. On our dashboard here, I'm using this Alex assistant. We can go into advanced, come down to messaging, and put in our ngrok tunnel. Publish that. And now let's go back to our cursor. This is running. We'll add another terminal here and we'll use our Vapi listen forwarding to our localhost 3000. Now we need to make sure that this is running. So we'll start up that And this is going to forward any server events that's happening on our ngrok tunnel to our local terminal here. So this makes it very easy to debug server events and interact with server events pertaining to our voice agents directly in our development console. We don't have to go to an external source in which our server events are being sent to, which lack a bit of observability. We can just do that directly in here. So you can see here our Vapi webhook listener is listening on port 4242, and that port is being tunneled via ngrok here. Now what I can do is we can open up our browser and interact with our agent here, and all those events pertaining to assistant interaction, including end of call reports and whatever we specify in our messages, in our messaging here, will be sent to that forwarded address, which is port 3000. So let's go into our React app, start a call here. This is going to connect. And I'll just go back to our CLI.
Hey there, this is Alex from Tech Solutions Customer Support. How can I help you today?
Hey, just wondering about how you are.
Oh, thank you for asking. I'm here and ready to assist you with any issues or questions you may have about our products and services.
Cool.
How can I help you today?
So as you can see there, all the events happening within that conversation are being sent directly into my terminal here on our CLI port 3000. So very easy to debug and inspect what's going on rather than do it sort of ngrok port 4242 side. So a bit of issues here with not found. We won't worry about that. But the main thing here is all these events are now being forwarded from our server URL directly to our terminal here. So really, this is where sort of the power of the CLI tool comes into play, where we only have to be within our development environment here when it comes to building voice AI applications. So very handy there. Now what we're going to do is set up our Vapi MCP. So once we've initialized a Vapi Web SDK into our project, and we're using a vibe coding tool like Cursor, for example, we want to initialize Vapi's MCP to be able to give a lot more contextually accurate things using the Vapi documentation into our IDE. And this works with VS Code, Windsurf, and Cursor. What you can do is Vapi MCP setup, and we need to choose what IDE we're using. Today we're using Cursor, and you can see our MCP was successfully set up in a single command there. If I go to my settings over here, up in Cursor, Tools and Integration, you can see Vapi MCP is now online. If I expand that, we can see we have search documentation, get example, get guide, get API reference, and so forth. Now, if I'm chatting with our code IDE, how do I use the Vapi web widget in my project? It's going to call our Vapi MCP to give a lot more context surrounding particular Vapi things. So you'll see calling search documentation, and we can run that tool. And this is pulling up-to-date and accurate information pertaining to Vapi's documentation here, and it's going to suggest a lot more relevant code edits than if we were to manually load in this documentation and things like that. Now it has a bit more information on how we use a web widget in our project here, current implementation status, the setup requirements, how to use, and so forth, example usage with custom properties as well here. Very cool stuff. So a lot of different commands that we can play around with here directly in your terminal to make your development experience much better. A bit of a niche topic here today, but I thought I would make a video on it for those that are interested and don't exactly know about the Vapi CLI. I recommend playing around with it, checking out the documentation, which I'll leave in the link below, and see if you're having a good time with the CLI and if it's making your development experience much easier. But at least for me, I know our Vapi init and our Vapi MCP setup makes my development experience with Vapi a lot easier. Anyway, everyone, that is it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it somewhat useful. If you did, leave a like and comment below. If you're looking to stay ahead of the voice AI curve, hit that subscribe button. I upload most weeks, but that is it for today. Until next time.